Welcome back. I'm now joined by Matthew from our business desk. Hello again, Matthew. Now, Hurricane Sandy fast approaching the US eastern coast. Stock markets in New York and companies there taking precautions.
Yes, they are. And in fact, the two major stock exchanges, the New York Stock Exchange and the Nasdaq, both saying they're going to be closed on Monday. In fact, that could even spill over into Tuesday. The reason is they can't guarantee there'll be smooth functioning given all those problems happening on the East Coast. Other, as you say, Claire, other banks, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs have been shifting operations to other cities. A lot of staff will be working at home today, but for those key personnel who really need to be there, a lot of those have been housed in Manhattan overnight to make sure they get to work. Of course, we know already the subway system there has been shut down now for several hours. 8.5 million people use that each day. I guess a lot of those will be working at home today as well.
What about the stock exchanges that are open this Monday? How are they doing?
Yes, well, of course, in Asia, markets have been opening. Some still open this Monday. We can take a look at how things have been faring there. And it's been pretty flat across the board. You can see there not much movement. The Nikkei is slipping very, very slightly. And we'll stay in Japan because some news emerging from Japan this Monday. The government's struggling to plug a hole in the country's finances. Now, the problem is getting so serious that the Prime Minister has been warning that they could even run out of money by the end of next month. Well, we're joined now by our correspondent in Tokyo, Justin McCurry. Thanks very much for joining us today, Justin, to talk about this. Can you start by telling us how serious is this problem?
Well, potentially it could be very serious, not just for the Prime Minister, Yoshihiko Noda, but for the Japanese economy. Today, the Japanese Parliament has just begun this extraordinary session that will last until the end of November. The idea is not to debate the budget itself, but to win opposition support for a bill that would help fund 470 billion US dollar budget deficit for the current fiscal year. The indications are at the moment that the opposition, which is accusing the Prime Minister of reneging on a previous deal over tax, in return for which they expected an early election, which now doesn't look likely, is also not going to support this this budget covering bill. So yes, some very dark clouds looming on the horizon for Japan at the moment.
Justin, Claire Pride here in the studio with Matthew. Now, what if they don't manage to reach an agreement? What are the implications then for Japan?
Well, the one thing that they do have at the moment is some time. They've got about a month until the end of November to reach some sort of agreement on this. Assuming that they don't, that could trigger some very draconian, some dramatic spending cuts, which of course could then push Japan, the world's third biggest economy, back into recession. Now, this is all unfolding on the eve of a Bank of Japan policy meeting due tomorrow. And Yoshihiko Noda made very clear in his policy speech in Parliament this morning that he expects Japan's central bank to expand its stimulus policies and to increase lending and asset buying over the coming months. Whether that's going to have the desired effect, of course, remains to be seen.
Justin McCurry in Tokyo, thank you very much indeed. Now we're going to stay with Japan. Matthew, Honda says its full-year results will be weaker than expected.
That's right, Claire. These results just out in the last few hours. The Japanese car maker said actually that its first half profits doubled to $2.7 billion, but it expects the full-year profits to be 20% lower than it had previously forecast. Now, the reasons for that, well, this strong yen that we keep hearing about, that hurts Japanese exporters, but also this ongoing problem that Japan is having with China over islands in the East China Sea. That's causing lots of problems for Japanese manufacturers. In fact, in September, Honda's sales in Japan were down by 40%. Well, they were a bit of a faller on the Japanese stock market today. Shares in Honda down by 4.7%.
And here in France, François Hollande under attack from business leaders.
That's right. So back here in France now, you may remember a few weeks ago, entrepreneurs scored a victory against the French government when they managed to get the government to change new rules they wanted to introduce on capital gains tax. Well, that's probably inspired these business leaders from bigger companies in France who also want some changes. They want to see cuts in taxes and in spending as well, which they say will help boost their ability to compete globally.
2 months ago, a dozen of France's business leaders came to the Élysée Palace to tell the president their concerns for the future. On Sunday, they gave him a stark reminder. In an open letter signed by 98 of France's top CEOs, they said they had reached the limit of what was acceptable to them. Their profit margins have reached historic lows, and they have called for a fundamental transformation of how France does business. The company chiefs have 3 key demands: to cut labour costs by reducing the social charges employers have to pay by up to €30 billion, to reduce tax on businesses, and to fund that, a hike in taxes on goods and services from 19.6% to 21%. The government is waiting for the recommendations of a report into France's competitiveness carried out by the former CEO of aerospace giant EADS. The contents already leaked in the media suggest the country must prepare itself for drastic changes, not something France's socialist government is keen on.
I reject the idea of a shock, which is more of an announcement than a truly therapeutic change.
Another figure haunting the French government, its trade deficit, more than 70 billion last year, a figure that's nearly doubled since 2007. The IMF and OECD have both warned France it needs to make structural changes to kickstart its flagging economy, a key topic of discussion when François Hollande meets the heads of 4 global economic institutions for crisis talks later on Monday.
So the president has a lot on his plate at the moment, a busy agenda, but that's not all. He's also facing a showdown with the head of Google.
That's right. Later on today, after that important meeting we heard about in that report, he will then be going on to meet the executive chairman from Google, Eric Schmidt. He's in France because Google's very unhappy about some proposals by the French government to charge search engines like Google for each link they make to newspapers and magazines, because they say that newspapers and magazines are losing out when they are just getting linked for free in this way. Well, Google is fighting back. It's threatening not to reference French media if that plan goes ahead.
Now, a planned merger between 2 of the world's biggest publishing houses could be scuppered by Rupert Murdoch.
That's right. We were reporting this last week that Penguin and Random House, 2 of the biggest publishers in the world, were planning to merge. Now it seems that News Corp and its publishing arm HarperCollins may be trying to step in to buy Penguin. Rupert Murdoch, it's being reported in the Financial Times this morning, could be paying up to $1 billion to take control of Penguin. Now, the reason for all of this, the reason for all these mergers going on, is that these companies need to get together, they think, to build the scale so that they can compete in this ever more competitive e-book, e-publishing world. So we'll be keeping an eye on how that story develops over the week.
Okay, and another batch of Facebook shares are being released today.
Yes, now, in fact, more than 270 million shares will be eligible for sale. Now, this is all part of this unlocking of shares gradually that's taking place over time, but that's a huge chunk of shares. Now, a lot of these are held by Facebook employees who might be keen to sell them. But of course, as we've been hearing, the Nasdaq is actually closed today, so we won't be able to get any sense of whether this is going to have an effect, because it was thought that perhaps if they do go and sell them, that could send that share price even lower. And look what's been happening. Remember back in May when this launched at $38, it was at the close of Friday, it was at $22, dropped a huge amount. We're going to have to wait for the markets to reopen to see whether they are offloading those shares and what happens to that share price then.
Okay, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you very much, Matthew, for that business update. And thank you for watching. Stuart Norval will have the headlines in just a couple of minutes' time. Don't go away.